speaker, Dr. Amsal, discussing about the Fano movement and Fano United Front.
Thank you so much, friend. Good morning, everyone. I think I was almost good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I address you today as an Ethiopian American deeply concerned about the Ethiopia future. For millennium, Ethiopia has been the cornerstone of Africa unity. It is the home of African Union and the UN Economic Commission for Africa, making it its capital. Addis Ababa, a global diplomatic hub, third only to New York City and Geneva. Ethiopian millennium spanning story is one where diverse ethnic group, over 80 of them, despite the many challenges, coexisted in relative harmony. Yet today, this ancient land faces one of the darkest chapters in history. Before I address the emergence of Fano and who they are, please allow me a few minutes of your time to provide a brief background to put the call of Amara people expressed in the Fano movement into context. Upon the fall of the regime, the Tigray People Liberation Front led coalition to power in 1991. In the founding manifesto, they had declared Amara as enemies. Now, they sit at the helm of power. Soon after, the TPLF-dominated transitional government began drafting a new constitution. From the start, this process was fundamentally flawed as it systematically excluded the Amara people participation and set to institutionalized divisive, hateful narrative that had the nation's historical ills at the feet of the Amara community. The military upper hand TPLF had allowed it to cement its hateful ideological stance against Amara into the very framework of the state. This original sin is the root of the current crisis in the Amara region and the persecution the Amara face across Ethiopia. The resulting constitution imposed a radical system of ethnic federalism, now a refined Soviet-inspired model of governance with no global parallel. The institutionalized ethnic identity is a primary political organizing principle and the use of ethnicity as a weapon of marginalization. With full control of the state apparatus, the APRDF, led by TPLF regime, then exercised power through a widespread repression. As documented by numerous human rights organizations, the Amara were subjected to sustained campaign of persecution. This included arbitrary arrest of detention, torture and ill treatment, sexual violence against women, forced displacement, widespread documented identity-based atrocities. When the state systematically targets people for violence, displacement, and ensures causes of who they are, this is not misgovernance. Under institutional law and moral consequences, this constitutes genocide. The grave injustice of this exclusionary constitutional process and ethnic federalism combined with brutal policies it enabled, created deep-seated grievance that continues to shape and haunt Ethiopian political landscapes today. Due to widespread protest, the TPLF-dominated Inuru Party was forced to undergo a change of leadership. In April 2018, it selected Abiy Ahmed Ali for the Prime Minister. Hailing from the Oromo wing of the coalition party, Abiy promised to reform the nation and bring stability to the Horn of Africa, was met with relation of Ethiopians and neighboring countries alike. The dawn of a better tomorrow seems to begin with a historic peace agreement with Eritrea an achievement that earned him the Nobel Peace Prize. Despite the party's long record of human rights violations, Ethiopians were eager to give the new leadership a fresh start in a desperate attempt to cling to hope. Tragically, however, before the nation could breathe a sigh of relief, news of unspeakable authority filled the airwaves. The Amara people were subjected to identity-based massacres, forced displacement, and kidnapping, being the hallmark of genocide in the Oromia and Benishangul-Gumuz region, with the federal government largely looking the other way, and in some cases directly implicated in the atrocities. Once again, the Amara were in crosshairs of state-backed violence. The growing number of atrocities across the country, what later on the rebellion at the hands of Prime Minister, forces the Prime Minister shockingly choose to ignore the atrocities and rather concentrate on consolidating his power, seeking to replace Tigrayan hegemony with Oromo dominance, which triggered a fierce internal power struggle within the EPRDF coalition, ultimately leading the TPLF to withdraw from the federal coalition government. The political crisis culminated in a devastating war that would go on to claim the lives of 1.2 million people. The so-called Northern War, which began in the Tigray region, quickly spread into Amara territory, where an estimated 80% of fighting took place at the invading TPLF forces advancing toward Addis Ababa. UN reports documented rape being used as a weapon, indiscriminating shooting of civilians, large-scale killing of Amara civilians, which constitute as war crimes and war against humanity, in places like Maikadra, Kobo, China, to name a few. It was a brutality and injustice that activated the Amara Cultural Force, known as FANO, composed of teachers, doctors, lawyers, engineers, farmers, and students. They hated the cultural code that their forefathers had, volunteered to defend the very existence of the Amara people. No community chooses armed self-defense lightly. But when courts fail, when police are ignored, and when the state itself becomes the threat, self-defense is not just another revolt, it is a survival. The war concluded with cessation of hostility, agreement between the PLF and the federal government of Abiy, a deal notably made without the inclusion of the Amara, despite the region bearing the brunt of conflict, the population being subjected to war crimes, the untold loss of human lives, and the infrastructural damage in the billions. Our pleas for an inclusive, just process went unheard. Once again, the Amara people were sidelined, a reflection of the mutual enmity toward the Amara held by both the Prime Minister Party and the TPLF. Regrettably, the international community went along with this unjust task. Despite misgivings for lack of inclusive, just process, the Amara community welcomed the silencing of the gangs and sought to recover from years of devastation. However, before the ink had even dried on the Pretoria Agreement, the federal government turned its focus to the Amara region by announcing the disbandment of the Amara Regional Special Forces. It ignores the clear and present danger facing the population. When the people protested this decision, the federal government responded by declaring a state of emergency, deploying the army to seize control of the regional government, and went into initiate a brutal crackdown. Under Abiy administration, Amara has been effectively criminalized. Even since they came to power, the news of Amara days has been relentless, curious to his administration. Even in conflict regions, particularly in Oromia, where systematic massacres have claimed thousands of Amara lives and forced displacement created over 4 million internally displaced persons. IDPs, as documented by human rights organizations, bearing the hallmark of genocide. The injustice once again calls for rise of spirit of Amara self-defense culture that calls for volunteers from all walks of life to defend their people from the regime's onslaught. Born from the ashes of targeted violence against the Amara people, the Fano movement has emerged as indispensable benefit for the Amara survival. Operating as a volunteer force with limited resources and the region under a communication blackout, Fano has demonstrated a remarkable resilience and tactical organization while battling the federal army. They are arbitrary to resistant a sustained regime onslaught, from drone strikes to armed assaults. It stems from 3 core pillars: the profound just cause they are fighting for, the unconditional support for the Amara people, the exemplary traditional legacy of Fano commitment to the cause of freedom that passed on through generations. The resolution has yielded significant results. Today, Fano maintains control of approximately 80% of the rural Amara region, while conducting the self-defense against genocidal war. The movement has also achieved critical organization milestones, represented by the formation of 2 major Fano organizations: Amara Fano People Organization, AFPO, and Amara Fano National Force, AFNF. These groups are currently discussing form a single unified command. Crucially, through a volunteer freedom fighter born of necessity, Fano has conducted itself with notable discipline, adherent to the rule of engagement of war was recently demonstrated by the acute transfer of captured government soldiers to the international community of Red Sea. While the genocidal war campaign against Amara people continues, the Fano movement is strengthening its capacity, expanding abilities on all fronts, including the capacity to govern the nation responsibly. To this endeavor, Fanos have opened up channels of communication with other communities around the country and also have publicly released a roadmap to justice, peace, and security, demonstrating steadfast in its solemn duty to protect the very existence of the Amara people all over Ethiopia. The stakes could not be higher. Ethiopia collapses risks creating another Somalia, plunging the Horn of Africa into profound chaos and opening doors to extremist groups. As long as a long-standing partner, the United States have a national interest and profound responsibility to support both stability and justice in Ethiopia. Yet, current U.S. engagement, including the role of former Ambassador Mike Hammer as a special envoy, has been widely perceived as a bias against the Amara people. This perception is fueling frustration among the youth. If felt unaddressed, this perceived his bias threatens to deepen the conflict and undermines the U.S. credibility and influence across the region. This is not charity. It is enlightened self-interest. Instability in Ethiopia fuels extremism, mass displacement, and global insecurity, which directly affects the U.S. strategic interest in the Horn of Africa. Despite these challenges, we, the Amara Ethiopian American, acknowledge are grateful for the life-saving humanitarian aid extended to disparately affected communities in Ethiopia. Distinguished officials, time is of essence. What Dr. King called the fierce urgency of now demands actions. We urge the United States to support non-humanitarian aid to the Abiy Ahmed regime, engage in a substantive way with the final representative, call for an independent investigation into gross violations of human rights, atrocities that bear the hallmark of genocide. Call on Congress to consider and pass House Resolutions 937, introduced by Congressman Buddy Carter of Georgia. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Congressman for his steadfast fidelity to justice. History will not ask what the United States said in the moment. It will ask what it chooses to do. Ethiopia stands at the crossroad. The decision we make today will determine whether the ancient nation descends further into chaos to begin a path forward to lasting peace, justice, and stability. It is clear that the fate of the country, as well as the region, will be shaped by Fano. To this endeavor, Fano stands ready to do all they can. The Amara people and all Ethiopians look the United States not just as a partner, but also a champion for human rights. This is not a moment for silence, but for courage. The Amara people are not asking the United States to fight their war, but to stand on the right side of history. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you, Dr. Amsal, for your great presentation. Appreciate it.